Dr. Eris Thorne was a man who knew a lot about sound, but he lived in a world that was far too loud and yet far too quiet. By day, his world was full of noise. He was a sound engineer. His small workshop was a jungle of wires, big speakers, and complicated machines with blinking lights. These machines could measure sound waves, break them into little pieces, and put them back together. Eris could create the sound of a thunderstorm, a gentle river, or a busy city street, all from his computer. But by night, his world became terrifyingly silent. You see, Eris had a problem. He couldn't sleep. It wasn't that he didn't try. He would lie in his bed in the dark, and that's when the silence would start to change. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. And into that empty space, his own mind would pour every worry, every forgotten thought, every tiny mistake he'd made years ago. His heartbeat would become a loud drum in his ears. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs would sound like a roaring engine. The silence wasn't quiet at all. It was a canvas for his anxiety. He was so tired. His eyes always had a faint red line around them. He would forget simple words like toaster or umbrella. He once poured orange juice into his coffee instead of milk. His life was becoming a blurry, exhausting movie that he was forced to star in. Eris wasn't just a sufferer. He was an inventor. He decided he would fix this. He thought the answer was sound. So in his workshop, he started building machines to fight the silence. He made his first sleep box. It played a sound called white noise. It was a steady, shushing sound like a TV tuned to a dead channel. He took it to bed full of hope. But after 20 minutes, the sound felt like sandpaper rubbing against his brain. It was harsh and annoying. He turned it off and the silence felt even heavier than before. Next, he tried brown noise. It was deeper, like a low rumble. For a few minutes, it felt a little better, but soon it just felt like a distant earthquake that never ended. It made him feel uneasy, not sleepy. Then he tried nature sounds. He created a perfect audio loop of a rainforest at night, with crickets and gentle frogs. But his engineer's brain knew it was a loop. He found himself waiting for the exact same frog croak every 42 seconds. It became a game, not a lullaby. He tried ocean waves, but the fake seagulls sounded like they were screaming. Nothing worked. His apartment began to fill up with these failed experiments. They were like little ghosts of his disappointment. He had a box of soothing sound machines that only made him more stressed. He felt like a ship captain who could build a perfect boat, but had forgotten how to sail. One Tuesday night, it was especially bad. He had been lying in bed for what felt like hours, his mind racing. He had a big project due for a client in the morning, and he couldn't even string a simple thought together. He was desperate. He got out of bed, his body aching with fatigue, and stumbled into his workshop. He didn't turn on the big lights. The only glow came from his computer screen. He wasn't there to work. He was just there to escape his dark, quiet bedroom. He slumped into his chair, the same chair he'd sat in for thousands of hours trying to solve this impossible puzzle. He opened a web browser, not knowing what to do. He clicked around aimlessly, not reading anything. Finally, he remembered a website he sometimes visited when he felt small and his problems felt big. It was NASA's website with a live simulation of our solar system. He clicked on it and the screen filled with the beautiful, black emptiness of space. Little points of light represented stars, and in the center our sun glowed brightly. Little dots, each labeled with a name, moved slowly around it: Earth, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. His tired eyes were drawn to the smallest, fastest moving dot, Mercury. He zoomed in. The simulation showed Mercury's path not as a simple, perfect circle, but as a strange, stretched-out oval. It moved quickly when it was close to the sun, and then slower when it was far away. It was a loop, a dance. It never stopped. It had been doing this for billions of years, and it would keep doing it for billions more. Eris leaned closer to the screen, his chin in his hand. He watched that little dot make its journey again and again. There was something deeply peaceful about it. It wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It followed rules. The rules of gravity. It was a pattern, and that's when the idea came. It didn't come with a bang or a flash of light. It came quietly, like the first drop of rain before a storm. What if, he thought, the problem isn't the sound itself? What if the problem is the pattern? All his sounds, the white noise, the rain, the waves, they were either too constant and boring or too random and unpredictable. They either annoyed the brain or gave it nothing to hold on to. But Mercury's dance was different. It was a rhythm, but a complex one. It was a pattern you could trust because it was based on the laws of the universe. It was a lullaby written by gravity itself. His heart started to beat a little faster, but this time it wasn't from anxiety. It was from excitement. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope. He didn't know how to do it yet. He didn't know how to turn a planet's orbit into a sound. But he knew deep in his bones that he was onto something. The silence of his apartment no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a challenge. He had a new mission. He wasn't going to create a noise to block out the world. He was going to compose a rhythm to calm the mind. He was going to build a cradle made of sound, using the gentle, eternal dance of a tiny planet millions of miles away. He looked at the clock. It was 3:17 a.m., but for the first time in a long time, Dr. Eris Thorne wasn't thinking about sleep. He was thinking about Mercury, and he couldn't wait for the sun to rise so he could begin. The morning after his discovery, Eris did not wake up. That would imply he had slept. Instead, the sun rose and found him exactly where it had left him, hunched over his desk in the workshop, surrounded by the silent ghosts of his failed inventions. A cold, half-finished cup of coffee sat next to his keyboard. His back ached from the awkward position and his eyes felt gritty and dry, but inside he was buzzing with a clean, sharp energy he hadn't felt in years. The heavy blanket of tiredness was still there, but for the first time a bright light was shining underneath it. The idea was simple, but making it real was a mountain of a problem. How do you turn a planet's path into a sound? He started where any good engineer would, with data. He spent the whole morning buried in scientific databases and astronomy websites. He wasn't just looking for a simple picture of an orbit. He needed numbers. Lots of them. He learned that Mercury's orbit wasn't a neat circle, but an ellipse like a slightly stretched out oval. This meant its distance from the sun changed constantly. He found complex tables showing Mercury's orbital velocity. This was the key. It meant the planet sped up when it was close to the sun, pulled in by the strong gravity, and then slowed down when it swung far away. Speed, distance, rhythm. Eris scribbled on a notepad, the words buzzing in his mind. This was the blueprint. This was the musical score. He just had to learn how to read it. He opened his audio software, the same program he used to create the perfect rainforest and the crashing ocean waves. But this time he wasn't looking at sound waves. He was looking at a blank grid, an empty canvas waiting for his new kind of paint. His first attempt was clumsy. He tried to map Mercury's distance directly to a musical note. When Mercury was far, the note was low. When it was close, the note was high. He pressed play. What came out of his speakers was a chaotic, wailing siren. It slid up and down in a jarring, unpredictable way. It was awful. It was the sound of a spaceship crashing, not a planet dancing. He winced and slammed the stop button. The silence that followed felt like a criticism. "Okay, that's not it," he muttered to himself, running his hands through his already messy hair. Too direct. Too harsh. He needed to be more gentle. He needed to translate the feeling of the orbit, not just the raw numbers. He thought about what had calmed him about watching that little dot on the screen. It was the smoothness, the certainty, the graceful curve. So he went back to the data. This time he decided the planet's position, left to right in its orbit, would control a very soft, synthesized tone that moved slowly between the left and right speakers of his headphones. It would be a gentle panning, like a slow-motion pendulum swing, not a jarring jump. Then came the velocity, the speed. This, he decided, would control the volume. As Mercury sped up, the sound would swell ever so slightly, like a gentle breath being drawn in. As it slowed down, the sound would fade like a soft sigh. It would be a sound that breathed with the planet. But what should the sound itself be? It couldn't be a pure musical note. That would be too distracting. It couldn't be noise. That was what he was trying to escape. He spent hours experimenting. He tried a soft, airy sound like the wind over a bottle. Too thin. He tried a warm, low hum. Too much like the brown noise he hated. He layered sounds together, filtering out the harsh, high frequencies until he found it. The sound was a soft, warm, slightly fuzzy tone. It had no sharp edges. If you had to describe it, you might say it sounded like a memory of a sound or the feeling of warmth. It was neutral, gentle, and most importantly, it felt like it had space inside it for his mind to relax. He began the painstaking work of building the loop. He used the orbital data to draw a long, slow volume curve and a panning curve onto his digital canvas. He wasn't just copying numbers now. He was conducting a celestial orchestra with a single soft instrument. His back hurt. His neck was stiff. The sun outside his window had climbed high into the sky and was now beginning to dip down again. He had forgotten to eat. He had forgotten to make more coffee. The world outside his workshop had simply ceased to exist. Finally, as the evening sky turned a deep purple, he leaned back. He had done it. He had created a 10-hour-long audio file. On his screen, the waveform looked like a gentle, rolling landscape of soft hills and smooth valleys. It was a visual representation of Mercury's gentle dance. He called the file Mercury Test 1. He felt a mix of wild hope and the fear of another crushing disappointment. He had been here so many times before, holding a new invention only to have it fail in the brutal testing ground of his own bedroom. He stood up, his joints popping. He was so tired he could barely think, but his heart was pounding. He copied the file onto his phone, connected his best headphones, and walked slowly towards his bedroom. The room was dark and quiet, the way he hated it. The bed seemed to mock him. He took a deep breath, plugged in his headphones, and lay down. The pillows felt like rocks. His mind, as if on cue, started its nightly panic. Did you finish the project? What about the rent? Remember that embarrassing thing you said in 5th grade? He closed his eyes, his jaw tight with tension. With a trembling finger, he pressed play on his phone. And then, it began. A soft, warm tone appeared in the center of his head. It was there, but it wasn't demanding. It was just present. Then, ever so slowly, it began to drift to the left. It wasn't a sudden jump. It was a smooth, gliding motion, like a leaf floating on a calm pond. As it moved, the sound swelled, just a tiny bit, like a gentle wave building. Then it paused. Not a full stop, but a moment of rest at the farthest point. And then it began its journey back, the volume softening as it glided to the right. His racing thoughts stumbled. They tried to latch onto the sound, to predict it. But the pattern was just complex enough to be interesting, yet simple enough to be deeply predictable. It was a path. His mind, which had been running in frantic, terrified circles, now had a path to follow. He wasn't trying to block out his thoughts. Instead, the sound gave his mind a gentle hand to hold in the dark. "Follow me," it seemed to whisper. "It's okay. Just follow the curve." He felt his shoulders, which had been hunched up near his ears, slowly begin to relax. The tight knot in his stomach loosened. His breathing, which had been shallow and quick, started to slow down and match the slow, rhythmic swell and fade of the sound. He didn't fight it. He just let his awareness ride the gentle orbital dance left to right, soft to slightly louder and back again. It was a cosmic cradle rocking him. He didn't remember the exact moment he fell asleep. There was no dramatic drifting off. One moment he was following the soft arc of the sound, tracing its path behind his eyelids. And the next moment there was nothing. Nothing but the deep, dreamless and peaceful silence of a mind finally, mercifully at rest. The world came back to Eris not with a jolt, but with the gentle, golden light of a morning sun. It was a light he hadn't seen in years. He opened his eyes. For a long moment he just lay there, confused. Something was different. The heavy, groggy feeling that usually sat on his chest like a stone was gone. His head felt clear. Not just a little clear, but crystal clear. Like a fog had lifted from a landscape he had forgotten existed. He could hear birds chirping outside his window, and the sound was pleasant, not an annoying intrusion. Then he remembered. He sat up slowly, the blankets pooling around his waist. He was still wearing the same clothes from the day before. His headphones were still on his head, a little crooked, and the cord was tangled around his arm. The soft orbital sound had long since ended, his phone's battery probably dead. He had slept, not just passed out from exhaustion. He had truly, deeply slept. A feeling bubbled up inside him, so foreign and powerful that it almost took his breath away. It was joy. Pure, undiluted joy. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh that echoed in the quiet room. He felt like a man who had been lost in a desert for years and had just stumbled upon an oasis. He practically leaped out of bed. His body felt light, energetic. He didn't stumble to the kitchen. He almost floated there. He made a fresh pot of coffee, and the rich smell was a delight, not a necessity. He poured a cup, took a sip, and for the first time in memory he could actually taste it. The deep, nutty flavor. The slight bitterness. His senses were awake. His first thought was, it was a fluke. A lucky accident. It won't work again. But a tiny, hopeful part of his heart argued back. The clarity in his mind, the rested feeling in his bones, that was no accident. That was the result of real restorative sleep. He spent the morning in a daze of productivity. He finished the client project he had been struggling with for days, his mind sharp and his focus unwavering. He cleaned his apartment, which had become a museum of his tiredness, with empty coffee cups and discarded notebooks. He even took a shower and put on clean clothes. But as the day went on, a new, nervous energy began to build inside him. The real test was coming. Nightfall. Would it work a second time? Or had his exhaustion and desperation simply conspired to give him one good night? And now he would be back to his old, sleepless self. When evening came, the old familiar anxiety tried to creep back in. As he got ready for bed, his hands were a little shaky. He felt like a gambler betting his entire life savings on a single roll of the dice. He had spent the afternoon refining the sound. He named the audio file Mercury's Gentle Dance. He made the transitions between the panning and the volume changes even smoother, like polishing a rough stone into a pebble. He wanted it to be perfect. He climbed into bed. The room was dark. His heart was thumping. This was the moment of truth. He took a deep breath, put on his headphones, and pressed play. The soft, warm tone filled the space behind his eyes. It began its slow, graceful journey from the center to the left speaker, swelling gently as it went. And just like the night before, something magical happened. His racing heart began to slow down, matching its rhythm to the sound. His tense muscles unclenched. His mind, which had been anxiously waiting for failure, instead latched onto the predictable celestial pattern. Left, swell, pause, right, fade, center. It was like a dance for his thoughts. They stopped their frantic running and began to waltz. He didn't fight it. He surrendered to the rhythm. He followed the gentle arc of the sound as it painted a soft, orbital path in the darkness of his mind. The next thing he knew, it was morning again. Sunlight, clarity, energy. He had done it. Again. Tears welled in his eyes, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. They were tears of pure relief. For years he had felt like he was broken, that some essential human switch inside him was faulty. Now he had found a way to fix it. For the next week, every night was the same beautiful ritual. He would get into bed, press play on Mercury's Gentle Dance, and within minutes he would be carried away on that gentle cosmic current into a deep and peaceful sleep. He started dreaming again. Not stressful, weird dreams, but normal, pleasant ones. He woke up feeling like a new man, or perhaps the man he was always supposed to be. His little black box of failed sound machines sat in the corner of his workshop, gathering dust. They were relics from a past life. He had his invention now. It wasn't a machine. It was a melody, a lullaby composed by the universe itself. He started to feel a quiet confidence he hadn't known in years. He smiled more. He made eye contact with people at the coffee shop. The world, which had been a gray, exhausting place, was now filled with color and possibility. He had solved his own problem. He had found his peace, and for a while that was enough. He was content to keep this discovery as his own precious secret, his key to a normal life. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A real-world test was coming, one he never could have planned for. It was a test that would show him his invention wasn't just for a tired, overthinking engineer. It was for anyone who needed a little peace in the dark. The test arrived on a Friday evening in the form of his sister, Ilara, and his 5-year-old niece, Lena. They were coming for a weekend visit. The doorbell rang, a cheerful sound that pulled Eris from his work. He smiled. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't annoyed by an interruption. He felt prepared. He had cleaned the apartment, bought fresh groceries, and even had a box of his niece Lena's favorite chocolate cookies on the counter. He opened the door to see his sister, Ilara, looking tired but smiling, with Lena hiding shyly behind her legs, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit. "Eris, you look great," Ilara said, her eyes widening with genuine surprise as she stepped inside and gave him a hug. Eris knew what she meant. For years, his appearance had been a quiet point of concern. The dark circles, the pale skin, the constant look of someone who had just run a marathon. Now he just looked healthy, rested. "I feel great," he said, and he meant it. He bent down to Lena's level. "And who is this? This can't be Lena, she's gotten so big." Lena peeked out, a small smile playing on her lips. She was a quiet child with big, observant eyes that missed nothing. The evening was lovely. They ate pasta, and Eris listened as Alara talked about her job, her husband's new project, and the general chaos of life. He found he could actually listen, his mind not drifting off into a fog of fatigue. He was present. He told them about his work, carefully leaving out the part about his secret sleep project. It felt too personal, too fragile to share. But as bedtime approached, he noticed a change in the atmosphere. Alara had set up a small inflatable mattress for Lena in the guest room. But Lena, usually independent, became clingy. This wasn't her home. The shadows in the unfamiliar room looked longer and stranger. The sounds of the apartment building, a distant toilet flushing, the hum of a different refrigerator were scary, not familiar. "I want to go home," Lena whispered, her lower lip trembling. "I know, sweetie, but we're staying here tonight with Uncle Eris. It'll be a fun adventure," Alara said. Her voice patient but layered with a deep tiredness Eris recognized all too well. It was the tiredness of a parent trying to solve a problem that had no easy solution. "No, I want my bed." Lena's whisper turned into a whine and then a full-blown cry. Big, heartbreaking tears rolled down her cheeks. Eris watched, his heart aching for both of them. He saw his sister's shoulders slump. He saw the look of utter defeat in her eyes. This was a common battle, and it was one she was losing. For an hour, they tried everything. Alara read stories. Eris brought in the box of cookies. They tried a nightlight, but Lena's little body was wound up with anxiety and overtiredness. She was trapped in a cycle just like he used to be. The more she cried, the more awake she became, and the more awake she became, the more she cried. Alara finally came out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. Lena's cries were muffled but steady. "I'm so sorry, Eris." Alara sighed, leaning against the wall. "She just does this in new places. She'll cry herself to sleep eventually. It just takes a while. It breaks my heart." Eris looked at his sister's exhausted face. He looked at the closed door, behind which his niece was fighting a lonely, scary battle in the dark. And he thought about the gentle, orbital dance waiting on his computer. A crazy, risky idea popped into his head. What if it worked for her? It was one thing for it to work on his own overactive scientific brain, but a child's mind was different. It was pure emotion, pure sensation. If the sound was too strange, it might scare her more. This was his secret. What if it failed? He would feel foolish, but then he heard another sob from the room and his hesitation vanished. He had to try. "Alara," he said, his voice a little hesitant. I've been working on something. A sound. It's not music and it's not a story. It's just a pattern. It helps me sleep, maybe. Maybe we could try it for her?" Alara looked at him, skepticism and desperation warring on her face. "What kind of sound? Like white noise?" "We've tried those whale sounds and rainforest things. They just make her ask a million questions." "It's different," Eris said. "I promise. It's very simple. Just a soft tone that moves around. It's calming." Alara glanced back at the door, listening to her daughter's tired cries. She was out of options. "Okay," she said, surrendering. "Okay, what's the harm? Let's try your magic sound." Eris felt a jolt of nervous energy. He went to his workshop and copied the file onto his laptop. He didn't use headphones this time. He set the laptop on a dresser across the room, turned the volume down to a very low, almost whisper-like level, and pressed play. The soft, warm tone filled the room. It was so quiet it was almost more of a feeling than a sound. It began its slow, gliding journey from one side of the room to the other. Lena's crying hiccuped. She had heard it. Eris and Alara stood frozen in the hallway, not daring to speak, barely daring to breathe. They peered through the crack in the door. Lena was sitting up in bed, her head cocked. The angry, scrunched-up look on her face was gone, replaced by curiosity. Her tears were still wet on her cheeks, but she had stopped making new ones. She was listening. They watched as her little body, which had been tense and rigid, slowly relaxed back against the pillow. Her eyes, wide open, were no longer scanning the room for monsters. They were half closed, following the invisible path of the sound. The sound was a gentle guide, leading her attention away from her fear. It wasn't an instant miracle. She didn't fall asleep in seconds, but the frantic energy was gone. The storm had passed. For 5 minutes, then 10, she just lay there breathing deeply, her stuffed rabbit held loosely in her arms. Then, the most beautiful thing happened. Her eyelids, which had been fluttering, finally closed and stayed closed. Her breathing settled into the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. A little sigh escaped her lips, a sigh of pure peace. Alara put her hand over her mouth, her own eyes filling with tears. She looked from her sleeping daughter to her brother, her expression one of utter awe. "Eris," she whispered, her voice cracking. What is that?" Eris felt a lump in his own throat. He hadn't just helped his niece. He had given his sister a gift perhaps even more precious, a moment of peace, the end of a battle. "It's just a gentle dance," he said softly, a slow, warm smile spreading across his face. In that quiet hallway, watching the most peaceful sleep he had ever seen, Eris Thorne understood something profound. His invention wasn't just a personal tool. It wasn't just for insomniacs or overthinkers. It was a key that could unlock peace for anyone of any age who was afraid of the dark, the quiet, or the scary noise of their own thoughts. He had just needed a child to show him. The morning after Lena's miracle was brighter than any Eris could remember. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of pancakes filled the apartment, and the sound of his niece's happy chatter was the best music he had ever heard. Lena sat at the table, swinging her little legs, meticulously arranging a pile of blueberries on her pancake. She looked refreshed, her eyes bright, the memory of the previous night's tears completely gone. And then the swooshy sound went over there. She was explaining to her mother, pointing to the left with her fork, and it was like my bunny was rocking in a boat. "It was nice." Alara caught Eris's eye over Lena's head. Her look said everything. It was a mix of gratitude, wonder, and a dozen unasked questions. After breakfast, while Lena was busy drawing with crayons in the living room, Alara cornered Eris by the sink. "Eris," she began, her voice low and serious. "What was that last night?" "Seriously, I've tried everything. I've read every parenting blog, bought every soothing sleep gadget on the internet. Nothing has ever worked like that." She didn't just fall asleep. She surrendered to it. It was the most peaceful I've seen her in years. Eris felt a familiar hesitation. Mercury's gentle dance was his secret, his hard-won treasure. But looking at his sister's earnest face, he knew he had to share. He led her to his workshop. He didn't launch into a technical explanation about orbital velocities and audio panning. Instead, he told her a story. He told her about his own sleeplessness, the crushing silence, the failed machines gathering dust in the corner. He told her about the night he watched Mercury on his screen and saw a dance, not just a dot. "It's based on the planet Mercury," he said simply, pulling up the audio waveform on his computer. "I turned its orbit into a sound. The sound moves from left to right, just like the planet moves around the sun. It gives your mind a path to follow so it stops running in scared circles." Alara stared at the screen, then at her brother, her understanding dawning. "You didn't invent a noise. You invented a rhythm, a heartbeat for the universe." Eris nodded, surprised and pleased by her description. "Yes, that's exactly it." Alara was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said the words that would change everything. "Eris, you can't keep this to yourself." He blinked. "What? No, it's my little project. For me, and for Lena now." "No," Alara said, shaking her head with a firmness he knew well. "This is bigger than that. Do you have any idea how many people are like I was last night? Desperate, tired? How many parents are sitting in dark rooms feeling like failures because they can't calm their child? How many people are lying awake, their minds racing, just like you were?" She pointed a finger at his computer screen. "You have an answer. Not a pill, not a complicated therapy. A simple, beautiful, gentle answer. You have to share this." The idea terrified him. Sharing it meant it was no longer just his. It meant other people would judge it. They might not like it. They might say it was silly. He was an engineer, not a public figure. He liked his quiet, ordered life. "I don't know, Alara," he mumbled, looking away. "It's not ready. It's just a file on my computer." "Then get it ready," she said, her voice full of passion. "Make it into something, an app, a website, something. Eris, if this can help even one other person the way it helped Lena, you have a responsibility to try." The word responsibility hung in the air between them. It was a heavy word. He had only ever felt responsible for fixing his own problems. The idea of being responsible for helping others with theirs was overwhelming. After his sister and niece left, hugging him tightly and promising to visit soon, the apartment felt emptier than before. But Aris's mind was full. Ilara's words echoed in his head. He looked around his workshop. He saw the box of failed sound machines. He remembered the feeling of hopelessness that lived in this room for so long. And then he remembered the look on Lena's sleeping face, the pure, untroubled peace. Was his sister right? He thought about the countless online forums he had visited during his own sleepless nights. He remembered the thousands of posts from strangers, all crying out the same desperate cry in the digital darkness. Can anyone help? I can't sleep. He had never posted himself, too proud and too private, but he had read them. He had felt their exhaustion because it was his own. Maybe this wasn't just about him anymore. A new, nervous energy took hold of him. It wasn't the frantic energy of insomnia, but the focused energy of a mission. He sat back down at his computer, but this time he wasn't opening his audio software. He was opening a web browser. He started researching. How do you make a mobile app? How do you put a sound file on a website so people can stream it? What were the legal things he needed to think about? His engineering brain, which was so good at solving technical problems, now started working on a new kind of problem, a people problem. It was scary. It meant stepping out from the safety of his workshop and into the big wide world. It meant risking failure on a much larger scale. But then he would close his eyes and remember the sound of Lena's deep, even breathing from the guest room. He would remember the weight of his sister's grateful hug. He had a key, a simple, gentle key that could unlock a peaceful night's sleep. And what was the point of a key if you never used it to unlock a door for someone else? A slow resolve solidified within him. The fear was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a sense of purpose. He opened a new blank document on his screen. At the top, he typed 2 words, Project Cradle. It was time to get to work. The excitement of his new mission, which he had named Project Cradle, lasted for about a day. Then the reality set in, and it was a mountain of confusing, boring, and frustrating work. Aris was a sound engineer. He spoke the language of frequencies, decibels, and waveforms. The world of mobile app development and user interface design was a foreign country with a language he didn't understand. He felt like he was trying to build a car when all he knew how to do was forge a single, perfect piece of metal. He spent the first week staring at lines of computer code. He tried to learn how to program. It was slow, painful, and made his head hurt. He would type for hours only for the screen to flash with an angry red error message. Syntax error. He had no idea what that meant. He was trying to build a beautiful, peaceful cradle, but he was getting lost in a jungle of technical gibberish. His old friend, frustration, began to creep back in. One evening, he slammed his laptop shut. The sound echoed in the quiet workshop. "This is impossible," he said to the empty room. "I'm not a programmer. I'm an inventor. I invent things, I don't code them." He felt the weight of his sister's words. "You have a responsibility." The responsibility felt like a heavy chain around his ankles, pulling him underwater. What if he couldn't do it? What if the idea was good, but he was the wrong person to bring it to the world? He looked over at the small black prototype device he had built for himself, the one with the single button that played Mercury's gentle dance. It was simple. It was elegant, it worked. That was what he knew how to do. Maybe he was going about this the wrong way. Maybe he didn't need to build the whole car. Maybe he just needed to show people his perfect piece of metal and see if they thought it was valuable. The next day, he changed his strategy. He decided to take a small, simple step. He wouldn't build an app, not yet. He would create a single, simple web page. It wouldn't be fancy. It would just have the story and the sound. He worked for 2 days, not on code, but on words. He wrote about his own struggle with sleep. He was honest about the failed machines in the box in the corner. He described the night he watched Mercury and had his idea. He kept the science simple, talking about a gentle dance and a path for the mind. He didn't make grand promises. At the top of the page, he wrote the name he had chosen. Mercury's gentle dance, a soothing orbit to fall asleep to. Then, he uploaded the audio file. He made it so that when you clicked a button, the sound would play. He designed the page to be a soft, dark blue like the night sky with simple white text. It was humble. It was bare bones, but it was real. With a deep breath, he bought a website domain name for a small fee, www.mercurysdance.com. He pressed the button to make the site live. It was out there, on the internet, for anyone to find. For the first 24 hours, nothing happened. The website had a visitor counter, and it stayed firmly on 1, which was probably just him checking the site from his phone. His hope began to deflate like a slow-leaking balloon. The internet was a vast, noisy ocean, and his little website was a single, quiet drop. No one could hear it. Then, on the second day, the counter moved. It went to 3, then 7. He didn't know who these people were or how they found it. Maybe they were searching for help with sleep or natural sounds for insomnia. A day later, something incredible happened. He received an email. It was sent to the simple contact address he had put on the website. His hand trembled as he clicked on it. He expected spam, or maybe someone telling him the site was broken. But the email was from a woman named Sarah. She wrote, "I found your website last night. I have not slept more than 3 hours a night since my mother passed away 6 months ago. My mind just won't be quiet. I clicked play on your dance and I didn't have much hope. But I put my headphones on and lay down. I don't know how to explain it, but my thoughts, which are usually so loud, suddenly had a road to walk on. They stopped screaming and started walking. I slept for 7 hours. I actually dreamed. I cried this morning from relief. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this." Eris read the email 3 times. He sat back in his chair and a single tear escaped from the corner of his eye and rolled down his cheek. He wasn't sad. He was overwhelmed. This wasn't a number on a counter. This was a person. A real person with a real pain, and his creation had given her peace. The next day, another email came. This one was from a university student named Ben, who was struggling with anxiety before his exams. He said the moving sound stopped his brain from spinning. Then another from a man named David, a new father who was so stressed about his baby that he couldn't sleep even when the baby was sleeping. He said listening to Mercury's dance was the first time my body has relaxed in weeks. The emails trickled in one by one. They weren't just compliments. They were stories. Stories of grief, of stress, of pain, of fear. And his simple sound was helping. It was a gentle hand in the dark for complete strangers. Eris printed out Sarah's first email. He taped it to the wall next to his computer. It wasn't just a thank you note. It was a reminder. It was a beacon. He looked at the angry red error messages on his programming software. They didn't seem so frightening anymore. The mountain of work ahead didn't seem so impossible. He had been trying to build this for his sister, and for a vague sense of responsibility. But now, he was building it for Sarah, for Ben, for David, for all the other tired, quiet voices he knew were out there, searching for a path in the dark. He reopened his laptop, the code glowing on the screen. He wasn't just an inventor anymore. He was a lifeguard learning how to throw a rope. He had heard the call for help, and now he knew he had to answer. The little website was no longer a secret. It was becoming a quiet sanctuary in a noisy world. The emails kept coming, each one a powerful dose of motivation for Eris. He would read them in the morning with his coffee, his heart swelling with a feeling he couldn't quite name. It was more than pride. It was connection. He had to make Mercury's gentle dance easier for people to find and easier to use. The website was a good start, but people needed to be able to take this gentle orbit with them to bed. Without a laptop, he needed to build the mobile app he had originally dreamed of. But the code was still a wall he couldn't climb. He was an artist trying to build his own gallery with tools he didn't understand. He knew his limits. He needed help. He remembered an old friend from his university days, a woman named Chloe. Where Eris was quiet and loved to work with sounds and physical things, Chloe was a whirlwind of energy who lived inside computers. She was a brilliant software developer. They had lost touch over the years, but he found her profile on a professional website. She was living in a city a few hours away. He wrote her a careful email. He didn't send her the sound or the website. He simply told her a story. He told her about his insomnia, about the box of failed machines, and about the night he watched a planet dance. He told her about the emails from Sarah, Ben, and David. He ended the email by asking, "Do you think you could help me build a cradle for people to carry in their pockets?" Chloe replied in under an hour. Her email was just 2 sentences. "Eris, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Call me now." They talked on the phone for over 2 hours. Eris, who was usually so reserved, found the words pouring out of him. He described the gentle panning, the slow swell and fade of the volume, the feeling of peace it created. Chloe didn't just understand the technical side. She understood the heart of it. "Eris, you haven't just made a sound," she said, her voice crackling with excitement. "You've created a digital campfire. People are gathering around it for warmth and safety. We need to build a better campfire spot for them." Her words filled him with relief. He wasn't alone in this anymore. A week later, Chloe came to visit for the weekend. She hadn't changed much. She still had bright, intelligent eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. She walked into his workshop and immediately went to the box of failed sound machines. "So these are the ghosts of failures past," she said, picking up one of the clunky devices with a smile. "Don't worry, guys. Your big brother is about to make you proud." She sat down at his computer and he played Mercury's gentle dance for her. He watched her face carefully. She closed her eyes just as he had that first night. He saw her shoulders drop. She listened for a full 5 minutes without saying a word. When she opened her eyes, they were a little watery. "Oh, Eris," she whispered. It's like my thoughts are tangled yarn and this sound is slowly, gently untangling them. I get it, I really get it." From that moment, they became a team. Eris was the heart, the creator, the guardian of the sound itself. Chloe was the architect, the one who would build the house for his creation to live in. They worked together in his workshop, which was now filled with the energetic clatter of Chloe's keyboard and the smell of the strong coffee she drank. Eris would explain the feeling he wanted the app to have. "It can't feel like a social media app, loud and demanding. It has to feel like the first page of a book, simple, calm, promising." Chloe would nod, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "So a dark, soft interface. Maybe stars. One big button. No complicated menus. Yes." "Exactly," Eris said, feeling understood. He learned from her too. She explained things in a way that made sense. "Think of the app like a music player, Eris, but instead of playing a song from start to finish, it plays a never-ending, always-changing lullaby. The file is a loop, but because the pattern is so long and complex, it never feels repetitive." They decided to keep the name simple, Mercury's Dance. They designed the logo together, a simple, stylized curve, like the path of an orbit, with a single small star at its center. There were problems, of course. Sometimes the sound would glitch on Chloe's test phone. Sometimes the app would drain the battery too quickly. These were puzzles to be solved, but now they were puzzles they solved together. Eris would adjust the sound file, making it more efficient without losing its magic. Chloe would rewrite pieces of code to make the app run smoother. It was no longer a lonely, frustrating struggle. It was a collaboration, a partnership. They ordered pizza, stayed up late, and laughed when they made a silly mistake. The workshop, once a place of solitary frustration, was now filled with life and purpose. After 2 months of intense work, Chloe held up her phone. On the screen was a simple, dark blue interface. In the center was the gentle curve of their logo, and underneath it a single button that said Begin Orbit. She pressed it. The soft, warm tone filled the room from her phone's speaker. It began its slow, graceful dance from left to right. It worked. It was real. Eris looked at the little device in her hand, this thing that they had built together. It was no longer just a file on his computer. It was a tool, a portable piece, a cradle you could hold in your hand. He felt a surge of emotion so strong it took his breath away. It was a mix of awe, gratitude, and a fierce, protective love for this little project that had started with his own pain and had grown, with the help of a friend, into something that could heal the pain of others. The app was ready. The world was waiting. The app was finished. It sat on their test phones, a small dark blue icon with a gentle white curve. It felt like holding a secret, a powerful, peaceful secret, but now they had to decide what to do with it. Chloe, who understood the world of the internet, had a plan. "We can't just throw it into the App Store and hope people find it," she said, pacing in Eris's workshop. "It'll disappear in a sea of millions of other apps. We need to tell its story." Eris felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Telling the story meant putting himself out there. It meant people would look at him, judge him, maybe even laugh at the insomniac who talks to planets. Can't we just release it quietly? He asked, his voice hopeful. Let people discover it on their own? Chloe stopped pacing and put a hand on his shoulder. Eris, look at this, she said, pointing to the wall where he had taped the first email from Sarah. That woman found a little bit of peace because of you. There are more people like her. They're searching right now. We have to make it easier for them to find their way here. She was right, of course. He knew she was right. But it didn't make the idea any less terrifying. So they crafted a simple plan. Chloe reached out to a few small, reputable tech bloggers and writers who focused on health, wellness, and interesting science stories. She didn't send them a press release full of fancy words. She sent them a story, just like Eris had sent to her. She told them about the sound engineer who couldn't sleep. She told them about the orbit of Mercury and the gentle dance. Most importantly, she included a few of the powerful real-life testimonials from the website with the writer's permission. She ended each email by saying, "This isn't another meditation app. It's a digital lullaby based on the rhythm of our solar system." For 2 days, there was only silence. Eris checked his phone constantly, his nerves on edge. He imagined the emails being deleted, labeled as spam, or laughed at. Then, on the third morning, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Chloe. It was just a link. His hand shook as he clicked it. It was an article on a popular, well-respected blog about technology and life. The headline was simple: The Sleep Inventor, How One Man's Insomnia Led to a Celestial Lullaby. Eris's breath caught in his throat. He read the article. The writer had perfectly captured the journey. They talked about his struggle, the failure of the old machines, the moment of inspiration, and the beautiful, simple science behind it. They called the app stunningly effective and a quiet revolution in sleep aid. He wasn't a joke. He was an inventor. Later that day, another article appeared. Then a third. A local news station, hearing about the local man with the unique invention, called and asked for an interview. The thought of being on camera made Eris feel sick. But Chloe again was his rock. "Just be you, Eris," she told him, straightening his collar before the reporter arrived. "Talk about the sound. Talk about the people you've helped. You don't have to be a TV star. Just be the man who wanted to sleep and ended up helping others." The interview was a blur of bright lights and a friendly reporter. Eris was nervous at first, his words stumbling. But when the reporter asked him to play the sound, something changed. As the gentle tone filled the room, he saw the reporter's face soften. She closed her eyes for a second, just like everyone else did when they first heard it. When she opened them, she looked at Eris with genuine wonder. "It really is peaceful, isn't it?" she said. That moment broke the tension. Eris relaxed. He forgot about the camera and talked from his heart. He talked about Lena, his niece, and how her peaceful sleep showed him that his invention was bigger than he was. He talked about the email from Sarah and how it changed everything for him. The segment aired that evening. It was short, maybe 3 minutes long, but it was powerful. It showed Eris in his workshop, surrounded by his tools, and it showed the simple, beautiful app on a phone screen. The effect was immediate. The website traffic exploded. The visitor counter, which had slowly climbed to a few thousand, suddenly jumped to tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. But the real shock was in the App Store. Chloe called him, her voice screaming with excitement. "Eris, look at the downloads!" He opened the developer dashboard on his computer. The graph showing downloads, which had been a flat line, was now a sheer vertical cliff shooting straight up. Thousands of downloads became tens of thousands. The app started climbing the charts in the health and fitness category. It broke into the top 100, then the top 50. People weren't just downloading it, they were rating it. 5 stars. Review after review poured in. "My baby won't sleep through the night. This is the only thing that works. Thank you. I've tried everything for my anxiety. This calms my mind like nothing else. I'm a nurse on night shifts. This helps me sleep during the day. It's a miracle." Eris sat in his chair watching the numbers change, reading the reviews as they appeared in real time. He wasn't celebrating. He was in a state of quiet, profound shock. He had started this journey alone in the dark, trying to solve a single personal problem. He had created a sound for himself in this very room. And now that same sound was being played in homes, in hospitals, in college dorms, and nurseries all over the country. All over the world. He wasn't just Eris anymore. The news segment had given him a name. A title. The Sleep Inventor. He looked at the words on the screen. It felt strange. He hadn't invented sleep. He had just learned how to listen to the universe, and he had shared what he heard. The world was listening with him, and it was falling asleep. Becoming the sleep inventor was like being given a new suit of clothes that were 3 sizes too big. It felt strange, and Eris wasn't sure how to move in it. His quiet life was gone. Emails flooded his inbox, not just from users but from journalists, podcasters, and even other companies who wanted to partner with him. The little workshop, once his private sanctuary, now felt like the busy control room for something much larger than himself. He was invited to speak at a conference for wellness and technology. The invitation filled him with dread. Standing on a stage under bright lights talking to hundreds of people, it was his worst nightmare. Chloe, as always, was his practical voice of reason. You don't have to become a celebrity, Eris, you just have to tell your story. The same story you told me. The same story that helped all those people. That's all anyone wants to hear. The day of the conference arrived. Backstage, Eris could hear the murmur of the large crowd. His palms were sweaty. He practiced his speech in his head, but the words felt jumbled and fake. He was a sound engineer, not a motivational speaker. He was introduced. The host used his new title. Please welcome the sleep inventor, Eris Thorne. The applause was loud, a wave of sound that hit him as he walked to the center of the stage. The lights were blinding. For a moment he froze. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces and his mind went completely blank. The perfectly prepared speech vanished from his memory. He stood there silent for what felt like an eternity. The audience grew quiet, sensing his fear. Then he did the only thing he could think of. He took a deep breath and he started to talk not from his prepared notes, but from his heart. You know, he began, his voice a little shaky. It's very loud up here, and very bright. A small, understanding laugh rippled through the crowd. It's a long way from my dark, quiet bedroom a few years ago. A room that was so quiet it was deafening. He told them the truth. Not a polished success story, but a story of failure. He talked about the box of failed machines. He described the feeling of being so tired he could barely think, and the shame that came with it. He talked about the deep loneliness of insomnia, when you feel like you're the only person in the world who is awake. He saw people in the audience nodding. They knew this feeling. He was talking their language. And then, he said, his voice growing stronger, I stopped trying to fight the silence. I stopped trying to block it out. I started looking for a pattern within it. I found one written in the sky, a dance that has been going on for billions of years. He didn't use complicated scientific terms. He talked about Mercury's path as a gentle, looping dance and his sound as a musical map for that dance. People call me the sleep inventor, he said, looking out at the crowd. But I didn't invent anything. I was just a translator. I listened to a rhythm that was already there, a rhythm that is steady and predictable and safe, and I translated it into a form our minds can hold on to in the dark. Our minds are afraid of chaos. This sound offers a gentle kind of order. He finished not with a boast but with a simple statement. I just wanted to sleep. And in trying to solve my own problem, I found something that could help others with theirs. And for that I am more grateful than I can ever say. The applause that followed was different from when he walked on stage. It was warmer, louder, and filled with genuine respect. He hadn't sold them a product. He had shared a piece of his humanity and they had connected with it. After his talk, people lined up to speak with him. An elderly man thanked him, his eyes wet with tears, explaining that the sound helped him with the anxiety he'd felt since his wife passed away. A young mother showed him a picture of her toddler, saying it was the only thing that helped her little one sleep through the night. In that moment, the title, The Sleep Inventor, started to feel different. It wasn't about his ego. It wasn't a label for his genius. It was a responsibility. It was a description of a service he was providing to the world. He was a man who helped people find rest. Walking away from the conference, with Chloe beaming beside him, Eris felt a shift inside himself. The fear of being seen, of being the center of attention, was still there, but it was now smaller than the profound sense of purpose he felt. He wasn't just Eris Thorne, the sound engineer, anymore. He was a guide. He had found a path out of the wilderness of sleeplessness, and now his job was to keep that path clear for the thousands, maybe millions, who were still lost in the woods. He had a role to play, and for the sake of all the tired people still searching for a way to rest, He decided he would play it as well as he could. Time has a way of softening the sharp edges of a struggle. For Eris, the frantic, desperate days of sleeplessness began to feel like a story about someone else, a person he used to know. The man who now lived in his skin was different. He was rested. He was purposeful. The success of Mercury's dance didn't make him rich or famous in a flashy way, but it gave him something more valuable: stability and meaning. He and Chloe formed a small company. They used the income from the app to keep it running smoothly, to pay for the servers that hosted the sound, and to make small, quiet improvements. They never sold out to a big tech company. They never filled the app with ads. It remained what it was always meant to be: a simple, pure tool for peace. One evening, a few years after the app's launch, Eris was in his workshop. It was tidy now. The box of failed machines was gone, donated to a local school for an art project. The space was calm, lit by a single warm lamp on his desk. He was reading emails, as he often did. It was his way of staying connected to the reason he did all this. There was one from a university student in Tokyo, another from a firefighter in Canada. The stories were always different, but the core feeling was the same: gratitude for a peaceful night. But one email made him stop. The subject line was, "From the ISS." His heart skipped a beat. He opened it, half expecting it to be a prank. It was from a NASA astronaut, a woman currently living on the International Space Station. She wrote, "Dr. Thorne, a colleague on the ground, told me about your app. Up here the silence is absolute. There's no hum of a refrigerator, no distant traffic. It's the deepest silence a human can experience. And while it's beautiful, it can also be overwhelming for the mind. The sun rises and sets 16 times a day, so there is no natural rhythm to hold on to. I started using Mercury's gentle dance. To listen to the orbit of a planet while floating in the space between planets is a profoundly humbling and calming experience. It grounds me. It gives me a rhythm that connects me back to the solar system I call home. Thank you for this gift. You've brought a piece of cosmic harmony to our little outpost." Eris read the email 3 times. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. He looked out his window. It was a clear night, and the stars were sharp and bright in the sky. Somewhere up there in that vast silent darkness, an astronaut was listening to his sound. The sound of a tiny planet. A sound he had pulled down from the heavens was now comforting a human being living among them. He thought about the long, strange journey. It had started in the deepest failure, in the pain of exhaustion. It had been built with frustration and dogged hope. It had been tested by a child's tears and validated by a sister's belief. It had been shaped by a friend's skill and had grown through the stories of thousands of strangers. He hadn't invented anything new. He had simply remembered something very, very old. He had listened to the universe, and he had found that it was already singing a lullaby. His only job was to turn down the volume on everything else so that people could hear it. He was the sleep inventor, but he knew the real inventor was gravity, and time, and the beautiful, predictable dance of matter in space. He got up and walked to the window, looking up at the speck of light that was Mercury, barely visible near the horizon. He didn't feel like a genius or a hero. He felt like a gardener. He had found a seed of peace that was always there, buried in the noise of life, and he had simply planted it and helped it grow. The world was full of noise and worry and hurry. But it was also full of ancient, gentle rhythms, the rhythm of the tides, the rhythm of the seasons, the rhythm of a planet's endless loop around its star. His work was done. His invention was no longer his. It belonged to the tired student, the anxious parent, the grieving widow, and the astronaut looking back at Earth. It was their tool now, their path to peace. He took a deep, calm breath. He wasn't tired. For the first time in his life, he felt completely and utterly in sync with the quiet turning of the world. The gentle dance would continue with or without him, and that was the most beautiful thought of all.